Hello and welcome to a standard deck profile. Today we're going to be talking about Grade 4 Minerva. To get some business out of the way first, it's been a while since I've uploaded. I've been struggling with a throat and cough problem that's made it difficult to speak for extended periods of time, and it's made me hesitant to make videos because I know I will cough halfway through most of the time, but we're just going to live with that problem. It's going to be a while before I can get treatment for it, but we're going to power through so I can start uploading again because the problem's not going away anytime soon. So, Grade 4 Minerva is an update to the existing Minerva deck that changes how the deck plays quite significantly, where you actually get to cut a lot of the Genesis support that we've had over the years since Minerva came out, and we get to play slightly better generics. But generally speaking, this deck is trying to get a Grade 4 Minerva into Soul to superior ride it onto Vanguard with its own effect, and then set up a turn with multi-attack and multiple drive checks. That's the win condition, and the downsides are that the deck costs a lot of counterblast to get its thing going, so we have to play a lot of sources of countercharge. The deck also struggles to build a board or to build shield in hand somewhat, so this is kind of like an all-in. I want to defeat the opponent on this specific turn because if they survive past that, they can clap back and kill me pretty easily. So without any further ado, let's get into the deck, starting with the Ride deck. The Ride deck has not changed since this deck came out. We're playing Vivid Rabbit because we need as many Genesis names as possible. Melissa, when it's wrote over, you check the top 5, put 2 cards from among them into Soul and Shuffle, and then if you Soul Blast it out, you can call it and Soul Charge 1. And then same with the Grade 2. Grade 2 checks top 5, puts 2 into Soul, and then can be called the front row for Counterblast when it's Soul Blasted out, which is a nice little bonus. It gives you multi-attack, whereas this one calls it to back row and gets a booster. And then Grade 3 Minerva, 5k to front row if you have a Regalia and Soul with Grade 3 or with exactly Grade 3. And then Soul Blast 1 to check the top card, leave it on top or Soul Charge it, and then a restand at the end of the battle at attack if your opponent's on Grade 3 or greater. All pretty useful effects. This deck can play pretty well going first or second. Going first, it gets fewer attacks, but it gets 5k to the front row, making it a little bit harder for the opponent to guard and stay at low damage. Because if you swing with a if your opponent guards for 25 and you can get 10k to a unit, you can hit over that 25k shield if they guard with a 15, and it can make it really hard for them to stay low. So overall, this deck is pretty aggressive still, and the Grade 3 Minerva is still a powerful win condition if you have Persona Ride. So if we brick and we have to just Persona Ride into Minerva and do Grade 3 things, we still have a chance at winning, especially the opponents at high damage. So that's been the go-to for Genesis. No changes to the Ride deck. It's still pretty solid and does everything we want. Then we go into the main deck, starting with 1 copy of an Omniscience Regalia Minerva. This is our Persona Ride. We only need 1 because we can recycle it every turn once we have it, and we don't need a Persona Ride in this deck because we get additional power from our Grade 4 if we did not ride. So it ends up only being an increase of 5 power if we use the Persona Ride on Minerva, but it will build Soul, and it's good to have this in Soul in general for fulfilling the condition of 5k to the front row when we're going first. So overall, it's worth playing at least 1. You can play 2, but you'll start running into shield value problems unless you cut another important Grade 3 or 4, which you don't really want to do. But yeah, it's nice to have. We can actually get away with playing 0 copies of Persona Ride if you really want to. I like the 1 personally, so to help push for lethal on certain turns. Giving plus 20 to the front row when combined with the Grade 4 means that you can hit over fronts and force the opponent to 2-card guard if they want to not take damage. With the number of attacks we can get, that's pretty significant. So I would play 1 copy. It's fine. It's also a Genesis card, which is going to help us with another cost we have to do. So pretty solid. Then we have our Grade 4, and this is what you're really here for. This is the main win condition of the deck now. This card cannot be ridden except by its own effect, and also has a bunch of other useful effects that activate if the opponent's Vanguard is Grade 3 or greater. So you don't go into this on your first Grade 3 turn unless you went second, and this helps the deck have significant amounts of power going second. We can potentially kill the opponent on turn 3 if they have Fake Hand, or if we push them to higher damage with Early Rush, or we hit crits on turns 1 or 2. This will help us catch back up. It does a lot of drives and makes going second with this deck on purpose a viable option. But generally speaking, this deck can go first or second, so it's fine if you lose the die roll. So what this does is, if your opponent's on grade 3, it'll get 10k to the front row during your turn. It's a continuous effect, so if you superior call anything, you'll also get the 10k. Then from Soul, it is an act skill where you bind your grade 3 Minerva from Van, and you put a card from hand into Soul, and you ride this card from Soul as standing. If you put a card with only Genesis for its clan, and you did not ride this turn, you also get 5k to the front row until end of turn as red text, so it's continuous. And at the end of the turn, you retire this, and you ride the card bound as rest. Then its third effect, when this unit attacks, counterblast 1 and soul blast 3 at the end of the battle, stand this unit and gets drive -2. Important to note, grade 3 Minerva pays the cost at the end of battle, but grade 4 Minerva pays the cost at the start of the attack. So if you forget to pay this cost right when you swing, your opponent might not let you take it back and pay the restand at the end of battle if they're paying attention. Just keep that in mind. It's really important to pay this right away. This will also let you soul blast out the chamomile from the ride deck into play, which means that you'll have the chamomile out and active in case you hit any fronts. So this is slightly more powerful than the original grade 3's restand for that reason. And also, you don't have to discard a card for it, because the discarding for this deck comes when you put a card from hand to soul to get the ride from soul effect. So that means you don't have to worry about keeping a Genesis card in your hand at all times, which makes this deck a little bit easier to play in that regard. This grade 4 retiring itself does mean this deck has to play a bit more of an engine in order to keep this grade 4 constantly in soul, which makes it a bit more combo than aggro compared to earlier versions of Minerva. So just keep that in mind. You want one of these in soul at all times. And this will generally be useful as both a discard for ride, because we have ways to get it from drop into soul, and it will be useful to keep in hand because of ways to put it in hand to soul, including its own effect. So it's basically never bad to see this grade 4, except that it has no shield value. Then we get into the rest of the grade 3s. We have 4 copies of Regalia of Wisdom Angelica. This card is very useful for our deck and takes up some of the spots we have to fill because we don't have the Nebula Knight order that Japan has. I still think this deck is fine. It'll just be a bit more high roll without that order, but with that order, it's potentially tier 1. So what this card does is at the end of the battle, this unit attacked. If you have a Vanguard with Minerva in its name, you Soul Blast 1, choose one of your Vanguards and it gets 5k, and you put this in a Soul and countercharge 1. Putting it into Soul part is optional, funnily enough. This is really solid. It synergizes with Chamomile because it'll Soul Blast out the Chamomile, countercharge to pay for the Chamomile's cost, and then replace the card in Soul as well to keep us at the same number of cards in Soul. And it's a grade 3 Regalia for this card's effect if we went first. Giving 5k to your restanding Vanguard is really nice, and it can help you hit very specific power thresholds where the opponent can't conveniently 2-card guard it. For instance, if you have 10k to the front row, the grade 4 swinging for base 23, which can be 1 to pass by a 15k. But if you make it a 28, your opponent now has to commit at least 20 shield to make it a 1 to pass, which is going to pressure them a little bit more and might tempt them to perfect guard or no guard your Vanguard when they would have been able to shield it. So really solid. Playing 4 of these because we want to see them at all times. We want to see one of these basically every turn. It's really good. Plus we can recycle them with Rare Element, which we'll get to later. Then we have 4 copies of Clear Magic Vivine. This is our new restander. It has 3 useful effects. First is that it counts as Genesis if our Vanguard is Genesis, which will mean that we can use this to pay costs for stuff that requires us to discard a Genesis card. And then it has, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Minerva in its name, you can pay this cost with Energy Blast 3. And when this unit is placed on R, this cost can be, when it's placed on R from hand, if you have a Vanguard with only Genesis for its clan, you counterblast 1, draw a card, and choose a card from your drop and put it into Soul. So this is one of the ways we get the grade 4 into Soul, but it can also get Chamomile back in the event that Chamomile was not able to be put back into Soul and was retired or we intercepted with it, which is really important. Being able to pay this with Energy Blast makes it a lot smoother, and it always draws a card, so we can essentially try to dig for more pieces when we do that, which is always really nice. And then it has the effect that when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Minerva in its name attacks, if you did not stand your Vanguard by card ability this turn, you can counterblast 1 and stand this unit, and it gets 5k until end of turn. So even on grade 3, it's a restander because it doesn't care about grade except for your Vanguard's grade, giving us some early pressure if we have to go first, and then Overall, because it doesn't involve any kind of soul manipulation or call from soul or soul blasting, it's just a solid restander that eases on the difficulty of the deck to set up. You keep in mind that superior calling this will miss out on the put from dropping a soul, which is not that big a deal. And it's not the best to early rush for this unless you have taken 1 damage and you can put a grade 4 into soul. Otherwise, it's better to hold this card, especially since it's probably a high value target for the opponent to attack into or retire. But because it's a Genesis, we can grab this with Rare Limb, which is also really nice. So we have ways to loop it. Then we have our Energy Cycler, 4 copies of Divine Sister Biscotti. We really just want to use these to keep our cards in hand afloat when we're cycling up to grade 3. And getting a little bit of extra guard that we can draw cards off of is nice. This card's really good when we went second, especially. And then it has a second effect that we won't use very often because we only have 1 copy Persona Ride, which is that when you place it on R, if you Persona Road, CB1 or EB3, look at the top 3 cards of the deck, choose the one from among them, put it on top, put the rest on the bottom, and if it's not the battle phase, you can call it instead of stacking it. It's a nice way to build a board if we Persona Road and we're short on rear guards. So otherwise, it's better generally to guard with this or to cycle it. Next, we have our Ace unit, Knight of Divine White Iskadid, or Iskadide, I don't know. Ace units, you can only play 1 of them in your deck, and you can only use their unique skill once per game, and they don't have any shield value. So they're not useful defensively, but they all have powerful effects. This one lets you EB3 to check the top 7 and call a normal unit with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard, and then you pick either this unit or the unit you called, and you give it red text that it cannot be chosen and cannot be retired by a card ability. So that is a really solid way to build a board and also protect an important unit, such as our Restander, which we want to keep in play for the next turn, because it's easily reusable. This also gets the 5k right away, means this is good for early rush. It can hit with a trigger, it can hit over a defensive, and with a booster, it can hit over a 8k Vanguard guarding with 15k if we hold on. No, that doesn't oh yeah, because it gets 5k. So I was right the first time. If you boost it, it gets 23, which is exactly the number that a grade 1 8k can guard for with a 15k shield. So that's fine. I confused myself a little bit there. Then it has a second effect. If your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3, it gets another 5k when it attacks. And then if you have 4 more rear guards, it gets another 5k. We're generally going to be trying to call a full board. So on grade 3, this is usually going to be a plus 15k attacker, making it the strongest base power attacker in the deck, which is something to keep in mind. And we're fine, because we can only use the unique skill once, we're fine with calling over this after the turn that we've used that, if we have to. Or in the same turn, in the event that we call Chamomile over that spot. Next, we have our grade 1s, starting with 4 copies of Battle Sister Coco. This is not a new card in the sense that it's from this new set, but it is a recently printed card. If you have a Vanguard with only 1 clan, and you have no cards in G-Zone, you get all of the following effects. When it's placed on R, you put a card from hand to soul, look at the top 2 cards of the deck, choose a card from among them, put it in a hand, and put the rest on the top or into soul. So you're essentially leaving a card on top deck and getting a card in a hand, or you can soul charge that card if it's bad, or if it's a grade 4 or something else important to keep in soul, like say a grade 3 Regalia unit to get that 5k power. And then this unit will also get 5k power till end of turn when you do that, giving you a little bit of early rush pressure, and getting you potentially an annoying 13k attacker if you're going second and you have to rush down. You're generally trying to put copies of the grade 4 in a soul with this. That's the primary use. And then it has on R or G, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and your opponent's drive check is a trigger, or their damage check is a trigger, it gets 10k power and 10k shield. Meaning this card is good in the late game when you've got all your grade 4 set up. You can just use this as 15k shield or as a big booster, which can help mitigate your opponent's defenses and keep the pressure going. Next, we have 4 copies of Magic of Colored Flames Rare Limb. This is still one of the best cards in the Genesis deck and Standard. A very important role player. It has, when it's placed on R other than during battle phase, if you have only Genesis for your Vanguard's clan, CB1, Soul Less 1, draw a card, choose a card from hand and reveal it, call it if it's a unit, and discard it if not, with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard, of course. So in the early game, if we have another good unit we want to call for early rush, we can play this and then draw a card, and no matter what, we have the unit we want to call already. Also useful when you have to dig for something important. You have 1 chance at getting it, and if you didn't get it, you can at least still call something. And then At the end of the battle, it boosted. If you have a Vanguard with only Genesis, put 2 rear guards in the same column as this unit in the soul, choose a card from your drop, and with Genesis for its clan, and put it in a hand. Really solid. We're generally going to be trying to boost Chamomile with this in order to set the Chamomile up for the next turn or for another Soul Blast later in the turn. And then we're going to try to pick up useful Genesis cards like Persona Ride, like Angelica, or the Restander. And sometimes, if we need a little bit of shield value to help us survive, we're just going to grab things like Vivid Rabbit out of Soul, or out of drop. So it's a really good role player. It helps us keep the setup going for the next turn. It pluses a card for both of its effects as it does that. So it's really solid overall. Then we get to Dissection Angel at 3 copies. Unfortunately, yes, you must play this card. You can get away with as few as 2, and I wouldn't play more than 3. So 2 or 3 is the number you need. This card was $70 at pre-order prices, but I think it now has dropped into the 20s and 30s. So that's at least good. So I would say pick up at least 2, and then if you like the deck, try to get the 3rd one. It's also just a generically useful Keter card. It's going to see a lot of play in the rest of the format regardless, especially if something like Saragon gets banned. What this card does is if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it gets 2k, so it becomes a 10k booster. Then at the end of the battle, this unit boosted, Soul Blast 1 and retire this unit and draw a card. You're not going to use that effect every time. And then once per turn, if your drive check revealed a trigger, you can Soul Blast 2 and countercharge, and this unit gets 5k. You will use this probably once per game because you're going to run into soul problems if you use this too often, unless you're getting a lot of soul charge or persona writing every turn or something like that. In which case you might use it twice per game. But this will just help mitigate the 3 CB cost we need for our pop-off turn. And in general, getting another 5k lets us do some funny things. For example, let's say our Vanguard is swinging for 23, boosted up to something like 33 because this is a 10k booster. So our grade 4 is coming in. It got 10k from itself, and then 10k from the, and then the 10k boost from this. So it's swinging for 33 with triple drive. And the opponent tries to 2-to-pass it by getting up to something like 48, where now we would have to hit 1 trigger to get up to 43 and another trigger to break 48. Now, if we hit a trigger with this and activate the effect, we get 5k power, bringing us to 38, and then the trigger brings us to 48. We break through a 2-to-pass with 1 trigger, which is a really nice little bonus. It forces the opponent to heavily consider perfect guarding or no guarding this attack, which can be very dangerous. And if they perfect guard it, we get to restand and swing with this with still a pretty decent number and force them to guard a big Vanguard again and still with drive checks. So that makes the second swing when this has 1 drive very threatening still, because if they try to 2-to-pass it to make it a no pass, we can still break through. So they have to guard with more shield value than they otherwise would want to. So that makes that card very good and the counter charge very good. And then when you need to clear out your board because your opponent's going to retire everything anyways, you can still Soul Blast 1 and draw a card and try to dig into units for the next turn. Great card overall, and that's why we have to play 3 copies, though we only generally need 1 copy in play, but we do need 1 copy every game. You're going to generally stick this behind the Vanguard, in my opinion. Then we have our Perfect Guards, 3 normal unit PGs. Doesn't matter which ones you play, as long as they have the effect that they're free when you have 1 or less cards in hand. And then 1 Elementaria. We're a grade 4 deck, but our grade 4 retires at the end of our turn, and we reride into grade 3, so we always can use Elementaria. Then we have the Fire Regalis. This just helps us build a board, and it gates value when you discard it for ride or other costs. So it's a really solid card to play. We don't really want to play any other orders, because in the future when we get the Nebula Knight order, that's going to take our order slots up pretty much. And the only other option for this deck would be to play Blitz orders, which don't help you combo, and so they're kind of bad. Then we have our triggers, 4 vanilla heals. You can play 2 of the effect heals and 2 of the vanilla heals if you really want, but just know that the effect heals are not going to save you from early rush, whereas these will. So I like playing 4 vanillas. Then we have 4 soul crits, Blade Feather Dragon. You can play 4 vanillas if you want, it doesn't matter that much, but every now and then getting the 2k and getting the card in a soul will be relevant. Sometimes that can push our Vanguard swing from a number ending in 1 into a number ending with 3 to help make it a little bit more effective at breaking through shield. And also the soul might be enough to help you activate the Vanguard when otherwise you wouldn't be able to, without like soul blasting an important piece out. Then we have 4 vanilla crits, 8 crits just to make sure our deck is as lethal as possible. And then we play 3 shield fronts. You can play the soul fronts if you really want to keep the soul flowing, but the shield fronts will help you stay alive if you go second. And also, this deck kind of has shield problems because we play a lot of grade 4s and a lot of grade 3s, so more shield value is always welcome. And fronts are really good in this deck because we generally will have 2 standing rear guards in the front, and we have a restanding vanguard, so we get the maximum value out of front triggers possible. And if you theoretically, one last thing is you could play fewer heals and just accept that we're all in on combo killing and play more fronts, like Akina did in the anime. That has been a viable strategy for Minerva in the past. Someone did top with a Minerva deck with 0 heals in it back when the Rare Limb stuff first came out, but I don't think we're there yet. I think this deck has the ability to throw its attack pattern to the opponent 2 or 3 turns in a row, and thus it can play for the long game if necessary, and playing heals is still good. It also helps us because we're going to try to take at least 3 damage to set up for our combo turn, and then we're going to be able to heal back down so that we have a better chance of surviving after doing that. So it can kind of reward you for taking a lot of damage by denying the opponent heals and getting resources, and then you can heal back down to still survive, in theory. Then we have 1 blue overtrigger, Ito's Faro. You can play the red OT too. Very small difference. The red OT will give you 2 swings with 100 million. This will give you 100 million in crit. This will also pick up a card from the drop, so that can help you find a piece that you need to set up the grade 4 for the next turn, or it can help you find the like a perfect card or something so that you survive, or grab Persona Ride. Overall, pretty solid card. In the early game, this trigger is devastating because it's a crit and grab back shield value or discard fodder. So it's always good to hit, whereas the red OT can only be good to hit on your combo turn sometimes, and that makes it a little bit weaker. Otherwise, this is a pretty solid build. We will be making some cuts for the Nebula Knights orders, which we'll need to make 3 slots for, which will probably be 2 Angelica to go down to 4, and then 1 other card in the deck, most likely the Persona Ride, I think. I don't remember exactly what the list in Japan we're playing. So that's the deck profile. Let's show you what an attack pattern might look like. First, we're going to have to assume that we wrote up and haven't soul blasted out too much. We're going to assume we've taken, let's say, like 4 damage. And we're going to assume this is a Persona Ride turn, just to show the maximum power of the deck. So we'll have this in damage. We'll have one of these in damage. It's fine. We'll have, say, one of these in damage and one of these in damage. We'll assume we discarded 2 energy cyclers for riding up. Just be a little generous with our setup. And we'll ideally have the following board. We'll have an Angelica over here boosted by a Revelim, and then we'll have Coco over here boosting a Vivine, and then we will have a Dissection Angel behind the Vanguard. And then for the ride line, we'll have soul charged a bunch of like random cards as we were riding up the chain. So we would have soul charged 4 normal units over the course of the game. So let's say we soul charge these, and then let's say we put a grade 4 Minerva to soul for like this effect at some point. This is not an unreasonable board state. This is actually a fairly common board state that I find myself in. And let's assume that we use Minerva's effect to check the top card, and we left a front trigger on top. And then I'll shuffle because the rest doesn't really matter. And let's move everything up a little bit so it's easier to see. We know we're hitting this front, and if we keep a card on top, the opponent will generally assume that we're going to hit a trigger. So this is here. This trigger's on top of the deck. Then let's assume we have like 4 cards in hand, I guess. They're not going to matter for the battle phase. We're going to put a card from hand to soul in order to activate the grade 4 skill, binding our Minerva, riding the 4. We have Persona Ride active, and then we have now an additional 10k to everything. We are not going to get the 5k because we did Persona Ride this turn. So that's not that big a deal, though, because 20k power is higher than 15. So currently, this card, let's assume we played it this turn, so it has 5k. This card over here will have 2k because the opponent's on grade 3 because we're on a Persona Ride turn, and they probably didn't ride down against us, or refused to ride up, rather. So this is what our board looks like. Currently, our smallest number is this Viviane because we're going to swing unboosted here. You can swing boosted, I suppose, in order to get more pressure, especially if the opponent's at 5. But for now, let's swing with a gentle 20k, meaning that they will have to double intercept, play a 10k shield, or play a real trigger. Considering the draws are less common, they'll probably have to play a real trigger. Swing with that, and then over here we have 23, demanding 15k shield, but also, importantly, going into Soul, let's assume we used a CB last turn, calling a Chamomile, and keeping us at damage neutral, because we're going to CC and then CB1. And then our Vanguard will get 5k, which is going to help us hit better numbers. Then we can swing with the Vanguard here. If we have a lot of CB and we want to go for a kill, I'll show you another attack pattern later. We can swing unboosted here, or we can swing boosted. It just depends which attack you want to have the more pressure. If you've sniffed out that your opponent doesn't have a perfect guard, either because they have like 3 and drop, or because you know their exact hand because they went to low cards in hand and then you solve their drive checks, you can swing with the big number first to just try to push through for a lethal, especially if they're at 5. But let's assume that I don't have that information. I'm swinging like this. Right away, we have to Soul Blast or CB1 for this card's effect, giving it another 5k. Just going to help it hit a really big number post Vanguard swing. We're going to pay the Vanguard's cost now because we have to at the beginning of battle. We're going to Soul Blast out this Angelica to set it up for later. We're going to Soul Blast out this other Angelica for the same reason. And let's Soul Blast out Minerva so that we can pick it back up with another effect if we want to. This will be 28-38 with 3 drive checks, already a pretty solid number. The opponent has to guard for 43 for a 1 to pass, and more if they want to, 2 to pass this, and 3 to passing this is going to demand a ton of shield. They're most likely just going to perfect guard this. And so we'll do our drive checks. We hit a front that we already knew about, so these numbers are going to get bigger, and the Vanguard is going to get another 10k. Now, 2 things are going to go off. We did hit a trigger in our drive check, so we can Soul Blast 2 in order to countercharge 1 and give this unit another 5k. If we had done this boosted, we might have been able to break through a 2 to pass when we hit this number to ambush the opponent. But if the opponent reads your cards, they'll know that they have to guard more than that. So it's only going to catch players who don't realize what all your cards do. So here's the front, and then our second trigger. That crit we didn't stack and we shuffled, so that's just luck. If the opponent perfect guarded the Vanguard, then we could put it somewhere else, but I'll just put it on the Vanguard again for argument's sake. And then third check, another crit. I'm going to assume I didn't hit this, actually, just to make this a little less ridiculous. Okay, the next card was also a crit. Okay, hold on. There, Fire Regardless. That's a non-trigger. So, pretty good drive checks. Hitting 2 triggers on a triple drive is not unreasonable, I think. Then, at the end of battle, our Vanguard will restand. The Vanguard has quite a bit of power, and it has a crit now. So this Vanguard swing is very threatening, even though it only has 1 drive. So we can swing here, boosted this time. That's going to make this a 15k booster. So our Vanguard is 10, 25, 45, 58, 73, I believe, with a crit and 1 drive. The opponent basically has to perfect guard this again to be safe. And we would drive check a heal. That's pretty lucky, but I'm not going to mess around with the deck this time. Let's assume that the opponent perfect guarded the last thing, so they were also at 4. And they guarded our first 2 swings because they were low power. So we can just we can heal out this restander. Now we have a pretty good graveyard to pick from when we use this rare limit in the next battle. So over here we have a 25, 35, 40, 48k. If they hit it defensive, which we'll assume they did, this will be even bigger. And then over here we have a 38, 48k column. So actually, I think I forgot to count personas. So 10, 20, 35, 45, 60, 68. That's a pretty good attacker over here. So let's swing with this one first because it's smaller. A simple number, 10, 30, 40, 48. These will go to Soul, which is going to help us build the Soul we need later for the next turn if there is one. And then now we have actually a decent supply of cards to pick from. We have Persona Ride, Restander, or Angelica. Let's take a look at our hand. And we have a Fire Regardless, so we can probably find a normal unit. We have still some CB left over, so we don't really need the Angelica per se. So let's grab Persona Ride in order to just set up to kill the opponent again next turn if need be. I don't know. Wow, that's a lot of triggers. I'll leave these two and drop. If we were shorter on CB, we could grab the Angelica, but here we're at 3 damage and we have 2 open CB. We can probably just no guard 2 attacks and have everything we need. So the Angelica is not necessary. Then over here we finish with this gigantic attack. 10, 40, 50, 60, 68. The opponent basically has to have had a 3rd perfect guard. And if we had put the crit over here instead of the Vanguard, because they had perfect guarded us already once, then this would be the swing that they have to have a 3rd PG for. If the opponent's at 5 when you started this turn is going to be basically unbeatable. Unless they hit their overtrigger or something. This demands so much shield value. Every swing post Vanguard swing ended up being like 3-card guard, and we had 4 drive checks to supplement it, and that just made it very difficult. Let's say the opponent miraculously survives though, and we go to end of turn. We retire this, we ride that Minerva that we bound, and this is our board after that. If we really want, we could Soul Blast 1 to draw a card, but considering our hand is all triggers, we probably value this unit more. Let me show you the alternate pattern now, where we do everything else the same, setting up, and we have the Rare Lemon Chamomile, and we don't have this Minerva because it's Soul Blasted out earlier, and we stacked the front back on top of the deck, but we don't need to actually show the triggers for this. I'm just showing you what the attack will look like. Okay, so instead of doing the pattern I did, we can do something like this. This will be in Soul, and we have the Angelica, which I Soul Blasted out earlier. So we have the Angelica here. I think this card was also in Soul. And we swing like this time. We swing with it. We swing here for the 20k, or sorry, the 30k, because we have Persona Ride plus 10k from this. So a humble 30, and then a 33. This going into Soul Blasting out Chamomile, giving our Vanguard 5k, countercharging 1, counterblasting 1. And then we can, instead of holding this attack until the post Vanguard swings, we can actually just swing with it right now. This will set it up into Soul. We grab the Genesis card, and then when we swing Vanguard, we'll still leave the 3 CB for this. We actually need a total of like 4 CB for the setup, so let's assume we have like this in damage. We had to use 1 CB. Had the 1 CB countercharge when we play the other thing. We swing here, we CB twice, 1 for the Restander, 1 for the Vanguard, Soul Blast 3. We Soul Blast out the Chamomile again, and we spend a 4th CB to call it out. And then like 2 other cards. So now we have this board state, and we got 1 more attack. And because we have Persona and 10k to the front, this attack is still swinging for 30. And we're still going to hit that front that we stacked, so it'll be swinging for 40 later, giving us a nice threatening number. And we can put triggers on it to get it up to higher numbers to balance out the powers in order to pressure the opponent more. Because this column is going to be good no matter what. It's going to have 10k and then the 5k from its own effect, and then this booster behind it had 5k. So this column will always be decent. Like this is 20, 30, 38. And that's a pretty solid number, as is already, especially if the opponent doesn't hit defensives. If we hit a front, it's getting bigger. If we hit a front, this gets bigger too. So like putting a crit over, putting the power and crit over here can just make a 50k number, making 2 numbers that are really hard for them to guard instead of having 1 gigantic number with crit, which you'll play around that based on how many PGs you think they have. If they PG your Vanguard twice, maybe you go for all in on making this unit as big as possible because you don't think they have a 3rd PG. Also keep in mind that you are on grade 4, so the opponent can Elementar you for free, so that's going to sometimes impact your ability to finish them off. But this plan is really good when the opponent's at 5, and you just need to throw as many attacks at them as possible because they can't hit defensive, unless they hit heals specifically. This deck is really soft, by the way, to getting over-triggered or like healed into 2nd defensive or something. 2 defensives makes it a lot easier for the opponent to guard everything, and you often end up with a hand like this, where you don't really have normal units, and you don't quite have enough shield to survive their full power Persona turn, especially if they're a deck with scaling. Like, let's say you're playing against Virgilla, and your opponent goes into the grade 3 with Stardust Blade, and they have, like, an additional 30k power on their Vanguard, because they have, like, a ton of units in their drop and in play. So then, like, guarding a, like, 53k Virgilla Vanguard with 3 drives Like, this gets you to 33. This gets you to 63. That's 1 to pass. And then, like, this gets you to 93, which is, like, not in the range for them to hit anymore, but then you have 2 cards left, and you still had to guard the rear guards, and potentially, and there are 2 rear guards after that, just to have a reasonable chance of guarding the Vanguard. So you have to no-guard the Vanguard, and then hope they don't hit too many triggers. Otherwise, you die to crits, or you die to the powers on the rear guard swings. So that's, like, what I mean by, like, you end up with a hand that isn't quite good enough to survive. And because you are blind soul charging, or you're not blind, you're soul charging 2 units out of the top 5 for the ride line, sometimes your pile is like 4 triggers and a normal unit, or like 3 triggers, a good normal unit, and a perfect guard, and you kind of just have to soul charge the perfect guard to keep your trigger density high, because one of the ways this deck wins is by hitting a bunch of triggers with 4 drive checks in 1 turn. So the deck is a little bit weak defensively sometimes, and weak at rebuilding its board against decks that can kill its board every turn. But the high roll for this deck is really, really powerful. If we count up the attacks, we had 1 attack here, 2nd attack with Angelica, 3rd attack with Chamomile boosted by Rarelem, 4th attack here, 5th attack here, after calling it out again, and then 6th attack here, which is and then 7th attack with the restanding Vanguard. 7 attacks, all with decent numbers and multiple drive checks, is pretty solid. For the low cost of 4 counterblast, but we can countercharge 2 in the middle of that combo, so it's like somewhat mitigated. That's like a good setup, and everything had additional power to the front row from Persona Ride and 10k. If we didn't have the Persona Ride, it would just be 15k to the front row, which is still pretty threatening. So this deck does have a really high power ceiling when you get everything. Also, sometimes instead of Camomiles, you'll just have 2 restanders, and you'll get slightly better power thresholds, because you'll have you'll instead of getting a base 10k, you'll get 15k when you restand, so that can be good. But this deck can kind of do this every turn if you can keep a restander and you can get the Chamomile back into Soul. It's really easy to get multiple grade 4s into Soul. Like, that seems like a like a sticking point or a bottleneck for the deck, but in practice, I have only had 1 game ever where I am unable to re-ride into grade 4 on a subsequent turn because I found no way to get a 2nd grade 4 into Soul. So that is not as big a concern as you might think. The bigger concern is hitting defensive triggers to stay alive and being able to field a board of units every turn if your opponent is killing them. Because this deck is a little clunky without the Nebula Knight order, but you're rewarded with a very high power deck. Just hope you don't get fake hand all the time. That's the deck profile for now. Minerva's a really fun deck and is reasonably powerful. If we get the Nebula Knight order relatively soon, like before the next set or within the next set's release, this deck will be a solid tier 1 deck with lots of results in Japan already, and I expect it to keep those results in English if we get that. But that's all for now, and see you next time.